Following Wani's death, protests broke out all over Kashmir and people took to the streets, but they were met with extreme violence. In response to the demonstrations, the Indian government also introduced a new crowd control weapon, pellet shotguns, which have blinded hundreds of people. Young and old Kashmiris are dying every day and are being buried in the Pakistan flag. Women are being raped as an instrument of war. The Indians are trying their best to label the Kashmir movement as terrorism internationally. And in the new geopolitical environment, they are succeeding to some extent. Ladies and gentlemen, the international community appears to be absolutely impervious to the state terrorism being inflicted on the helpless Kashmiris, mainly because of economic.
Dispute. So it's the root cause between India and Pakistan. But there are many other causes. I'll come to the root cause a little later. The first is the creation of Pakistan, because India, up to this day, and particularly extremists who are ascendant in India today, do not accept the creation of Pakistan in their heart. And therefore, they think that this is their responsibility to correct this historical wrong. I'm talking about the BJP, I'm talking about RSS, which is the parent organization of the Bharatiya Janata Party, about Bajrang Dal, about Shiv Sena and other extremist organizations. So, in their heart of hearts, the Indians think that this was a cardinal sin which was committed against Akhand Bharat or Bharat Bhumi, and therefore Pakistan must be punished for that sin, and Indians should atone for that sin by waging a new renaissance for Hinduism and for the consolidation of the entire geographical territory of Akhand Bharat. Now, this is not something theoretical, because you see its manifestations in India every day. I mean, these past years, you've seen that Nathuram Godse, the assassin of Gandhi, was lionized. And then there was this very tall statue of Patel erected in Gujarat. It is a 597-foot statue which has been erected in Gujarat. The messages are that Godse was good, Gandhi was bad, that Patel was a patriot, Nehru was not, and there is discrimination, systematic discrimination against Muslims. And the message there is that Hindus are paragons of purity and Muslims are malich, outsiders. The second grouse or grudge against the Muslims in India and against Pakistan, of course, let me tell you right in the beginning, the election campaign that was launched and steered by Mr. Modi himself, he designated 3 targets. One was Pakistan as a hostile country, Muslims within India who were perceived and projected as subversive elements within the Indian Union, and third, Kashmiris, which was hostile to India and therefore dubbed as traitors or sympathizers of Pakistan and so on. So the second thing for which Muslims have to pay penance is the Muslim rule, the 1,000 Muslim rule. They think that these were also interventionists, outsiders, imperialists, and therefore there's a revisionist version of history which is being popularized. And in doing so, they're also asking contemporary Muslims to pay for those excesses that were committed by the Muslim rulers, whether they were Turkic or Mughal or others. And the third dimension is that they somehow believe, the Indian politicians, particularly the extremist politicians, they think that Pakistan stands in the way of the great power status of India. And fifth is Pakistan's nuclear status. They have not accepted it fully. It has created a situation of parity between India and Pakistan as far as the strategic realm is concerned. Conventional asymmetry is there, but they have not fully accepted this reality, and they really try to scupper it or scuttle it or neutralize it by many means and by many doctrines. And the sixth reality, of course, is the majoritarianism, Hindu majoritarianism. They said, you were talking about two-nation theory. We will also talk about two-nation theory, but very indirectly, Hindu majoritarianism. We are in majority, we are 80%, and we do not have to be held hostage by the Muslim voters. Now, what are the responses of the Indian society and political elite to these factors that I have counted? There's a tidal wave of violent extremism in India, and as I said earlier, it is targeting Pakistan, Muslims, and Kashmiris. We all have heard about this excessive militant Gau Raksha campaign, cow protection, Ghar Wapsi, which is they are forcing poor, marginalized Muslims to reconvert to Hinduism. There's also this love jihad troll. They say that Muslims are marrying Hindu girls to convert them to Islam. And there are restrictions on prayers in open places. And in one instance, a family was beaten up because the boys of the family were playing cricket on the day of Holi, and they thought that this was a sacrilege of sorts. Michelle Bachelet, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, in her report, which she presented to the Human Rights Council earlier this year, she recorded her concern, and she says that there is increasing harassment and targeting of Muslims in India. Now, what was the election campaign? Let's talk about the election campaign. I think that basically, there were many domestic issues, of course, about farmers, about jobs, unemployment, and so on. But the external, foreign, or religious agenda that dominated was demonization of Muslims in Pakistan and Kashmiris. And this campaign saw a very loud anti-Muslim vitriolic campaign against Muslims. Pakistan was projected as an arch enemy, Indian Muslims as not patriots, and Kashmiris, as I mentioned earlier, as traitors. They also, in their manifesto, threatened to or committed to repeal Articles 370 and 35A. Now, I have given this background to all of you to enable us to look at the big picture. This phenomenon that you see in India is not just confined to India. There's a rise of ethno-nationalism and ultra-nationalism in the United States of America, in Europe, in the Middle East. And because of this ethno-nationalism, they too would support India, because this is now becoming a global phenomenon, Islamophobia or these extremist instances of ethnic nationalism. They will, so we have to grasp this reality. The reality is that the West would tolerate India's crimes against humanity in the Indian Occupied Kashmir. They would tolerate xenophobia and instances of incitement to hatred, which are all violations of international humanitarian law and international human rights law. The second point that I want to emphasize is that what you have seen in India is not a transient phenomenon. It is going to be an enduring phenomenon. So we should brace ourselves to deal with this phenomenon, not just this year or in the next 5-year term, but for decades to come. Let me now turn to Kashmir, which was the subject assigned to me. And I personally believe that Kashmir, or Jammu and Kashmir, the territory, the state of Jammu and Kashmir, was rightfully Pakistan's in 1947. And because of a number of steps that were taken by the Maharaja and Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru and Mr. Patel and the Viceroy of India, this right of Pakistan was denied, and the natural process of integration of Jammu and Kashmir to Pakistan was thwarted by conspiracy, by all the actors that I have already mentioned, by political maneuvering, by legal deceit, because by the illegal transfer of the Muslim majority areas in the Gurdaspur district to India, by mobilization of troops between June 1947 to November or October 1947, thousands of troops from East Punjab and Kapurthala were moved into Kashmir in civilian clothes to prepare for the occupation. And finally, there was the armed occupation of the territory. I simply believe that at that time, historically speaking, Pakistan was robbed of Kashmir, and Kashmiris' demand for realization of their self-determination or aspirations for statehood were denied to them. Now let me talk about the centrality of the Kashmir issue for India and Pakistan, or India and Pakistan crisis as it was called. In 1947-48, a war was fought between India and Pakistan on Kashmir, and that was the casus belli, or the cause of war. And up to this day, Kashmir is the casus belli, militarily speaking. There has been no other factor, and this is the ultimate cause of the contention and confrontation and discord between India and Pakistan. Legally, the Indian Occupied Kashmir has a sui generis status. India's acceptance, India's occupation of the territory is a transitional phase, because it has not been, this territory has not been integrated with the Indian Federation or with the Indian state in accordance with international law. Legally, Kashmir is not India's part, let alone integral part. India does have de facto control over the territory, but it doesn't have or enjoy a de jure capacity or status. After occupation, India has exercised what may be called by a lawyer or a legal expert is occupational constitutionalism. There's something called colonial constitutionalism. This is occupational constitutionalism to expand its foreign domination and control to the occupied territory through a series of legal mechanisms and processes across time that institute a state of emergency and permanent crises in Kashmir. Then there is multilateral diplomacy, which kicked in later when the Security Council of the United Nations took cognizance of the issue, and they mandated that a plebiscite should be held in the Jammu and Kashmir territory to ascertain the wishes of the Kashmiri people. The aggrieved parties, which is Pakistan and the Kashmiris, they were aggrieved because they were denied their rights, both Pakistan and Kashmiris. We accepted that decision in good faith, and we uphold that or endorse that decision up to this day. Whereas India first accepted that decision and then reneged on it. And therefore the aggressor basically rejects this fair dispensation which was given to India, Pakistan, and the people of Jammu and Kashmir. India later on said that the elections to the Constituent Assembly or the elections that they held in the 50s constituted a substitute for the UN Security Council resolutions or for a plebiscite, because they said that by participating in these elections, Kashmiris had exercised their right to self-determination. But this has been rejected explicitly by Resolutions 91 and Resolution 122 of the Security Council. Now, let me compare and contrast the approaches that we have between the two countries. India's approach is coercive, ours is diplomatic. We are extending diplomatic and political support to the people of Jammu and Kashmir. Yes, in the past we have fought wars with India over Kashmir. Yes, in the past we also deployed asymmetric assets in Kashmir. But right now we are supporting political and diplomatic movement in Kashmir. India, on the other hand, relies on four things. One is, or it has unleashed 3 wars against Pakistan, and I'll allude to the fourth one. One is a war against the people of Indian Occupied Kashmir, and we consider that potentially this IOK, this territory, is Pakistan's territory. So they are our citizens. So that war is also against the state of Pakistan. Second, they are hostile fire across the LOC, where they kill Azad Kashmiri citizens and our armed personnel, destroy their houses, destroy their livestock and their crops, and their violations of ceasefire cause havoc. And the third is proxy war against Pakistan, against all parts of Pakistan. And the fourth war that they have unleashed and they boast about is the hybrid war. It is very fashionable to talk about hybrid war these days, but I don't want to go into detail. The fifth dimension is the nuclear war, a potential nuclear war between India and Pakistan. And I'd say if there's ever a war between India, if there's ever a war escalating or spiraling to the nuclear level, the trigger would be Kashmir. You would never know when a conventional engagement would cross a certain sensitive threshold and would lead to a nuclear Armageddon or nuclear exchange. Scientists and analysts have conducted some studies, and they say that, hypothetically speaking, if 15 kiloton bombs of the size of the little boy that was used in Hiroshima are used by India and Pakistan for 10 to 15 days, 20 million people in India and Pakistan would die instantly, 50 million in the coming days, and 2.5 billion people of the world would be affected directly or indirectly because of these fine particles which would be released into the atmosphere and stratosphere because of radiation. There would be refugee outflows. There would be a cancer pandemic. There would be change in weather patterns, and there would be global recession. Now, let me tell you, we've talked about the centrality of the Jammu and Kashmir dispute to India-Pakistan relationship, if you can call it a relationship. both extremists and moderates don't get it right. Extremists, Modi or his national security advisor, they have a three-point agenda. Kill Kashmiris brutally so that you subjugate them. Second, don't talk to them in the political idiom. Third, close all the doors for talks with Pakistan. They don't get it right. Then there are moderates like Yashwant Sinha or Chidambaram. Yashwant Sinha says that, in fact, the muscular policy of BJP or Narendra Modi is not working in Kashmir. And he says that Narendra Modi is pursuing a doctrine of brute force there. And Chidambaram also not only agrees, he warns India, the ruling party, of its muscular militaristic policy and says that there should be some sort of engagement. The terms that they use, their perception is that the problem is of mismanagement, that just mismanaging affairs in Kashmir. What they do not know, and mismanaging affairs in a province, what they do not recognize is that the root cause of all the problems in Kashmir is self-determination, and it has political roots. So when the so-called moderates criticize the BJP government, I always feel that Congress has been no less ruthless towards the Kashmiris. And it's like the pot calling the kettle black. As a matter of fact, their periods of ascendancy have also been ruinous for the territory of Jammu and Kashmir. So what they do not recognize are the realities on the ground. And the realities on the ground are, one, occupation and oppression, and that the seedbed for freedom in IOK, Indian Occupied Kashmir, is political. I can also establish by quoting facts and figures given by the Indian security or Indian occupation forces in IOK and in Delhi that Pakistan right now is not interfering inside IOK militarily. One is the fence, second is their own claims, the claims of the Indian officials, Indian military officials, that last year, 2018, for instance, they eliminated 276 militants out of a total number of 500. And they say that this year, 2019, they would eliminate the rest. They also boastfully claim that nobody dares cross this impregnable line of control fence. And if anybody does that, he is eliminated in the hinterland. Now, I think that General Jaffery alluded to the horrendous human rights situation prevalent in the Indian Occupied Kashmir right now. I can give you all sorts of figures, but let me depict a day for you. There are these ruthless cordon and search operations in which young men are being targeted, houses are being destroyed, these transformers are being damaged, and our leaders have been incarcerated, and they have been sent to the notorious Tihar jail in Delhi. And in Delhi you have Mr. Yasin Malik, Mr. Shabir Shah, Asya Indrabi, and her two associates. They are there. They are being tortured. And all political activists in the Indian Occupied Kashmir are detained. Then they are tortured. Then they are killed. Thousands are disappeared every year. And you find these unmarked graves. So there is a human rights crisis there. Now, I use this platform to condemn all these detentions and persecution of the Kashmiris through the National Investigation Agency. Women are being raped, crops and orchards are being burnt, and businesses are being ransacked, and vehicles have been burnt. So Kashmiris are aliens and slaves in their own homeland. Mr. Yasin Malik already has a very, very fragile health, and he is being tortured, and God forbid something even more serious happens to him. I also condemn this ban on the JKLF and the Jamaat-e-Islami. I'm coming to the concluding part of my presentation, and here are some operative points that I want to share with you. The first is that make Pakistan a strong nation. This is self-evident, but I reiterate it. I think that Jaffery alluded to it. The onus is on us to make Pakistan a strong nation, because we introduced this dialectic in the subcontinent. We said that Muslims will have a separate homeland, that this would be an ideal homeland, and the value systems that we would adopt would be emulated by other nations. Make Pakistan a strong nation, strategically, politically, economically, and make economic development an absolute priority. This is a strategic priority, because if Pakistan is weak economically, our struggle for Kashmir would suffer grievously. I would say spend more on defense and national security, not less, because there would be some people who would say that India has become so strong, India's growth rate is robust, India's conventional arsenal is growing, so just capitulate and focus on your economy. No, you won't be able to develop your economy if you do not have a defense muscle, and if you do not have sufficient strength for upholding and underpinning your national security. Work on national unity. I would say that you can't achieve national unity by hectoring or lecturing or shaming other people that so and so is not patriotic and so is not nationalistic. For God's sake, unity is crafted by states, and that's why you need statesmen and you need leaders who would craft that kind of unity among diverse and disparate segments of society which exist in all the states, all federal states. Statecraft is required to forge national unity. Then I would say that it looks likely that on Modi's watch, space for bilateral diplomacy would shrink further. And therefore, my advice to everybody is, here in Islamabad, to the decision makers, to all the stakeholders, is put Kashmir back on the multilateral agenda. That's very important, because if you do not go to the international forums, whether it is the United Nations or international parliaments or interparliamentary union, or to the international civil society or to international media networks, then you are in fact doing India's bidding, which is to bilateralize the issue. And India wants a bilateral paradigm to be accepted by Pakistan, because when they sit across the table bilaterally, they do not address the issue of Jammu and Kashmir. They evade it. They parry all questions about Kashmir when they're sitting across the table on Kashmir. So I'll come to that point. Then, taking advantage of your presence, sir, I would say that in our traditional diplomacy, we must incorporate lawfare. And you've been talking about lawfare in your previous presentations. And why? Because Indians are very, very smart in lawfare. I'll give you an example. The Kulbhushan Yadav case, very clear case. But they have complicated it by taking it to the ICJ. And they have, I mean, here you have a person who has acted against the interests of Pakistan illegally. He's an external, a foreign agent. He's been captured in our land, but India very deftly and skillfully has hidden behind some international covenants. It has invoked those international covenants. Now, after having done that, what do? They buy time. They buy time, and they frustrate Pakistan's clear-cut legal agenda. The second example is, while we were very successful in our the 27th of February operations, India attacked us, India committed aggression against Pakistan, and after having done that, we retaliated with confidence, demonstrating unity, exuding confidence, and then our response was civil and proportionate. We were not warmongers. We did not want to whip up anger and war hysteria. So this is what we did. The world recognized that here is a civilized society which is capable of defending its national interests. But what happened later on? Lawfare. India first accuses Pakistan of being responsible for a false flag operation in Pulwama. We didn't know what happened there. There's no evidence, no substantiation, no investigation. And after it happened, there was somebody from Pakistan representing Jaish-e-Mohammed who accepted responsibility. And then the Indians connect instantly, while this thing was unfolding, and we didn't have all the details, said that Pulwama was connected to Jaish-e-Mohammed, and then they took it to the Security Council. And in the Security Council, they built up pressure on the Permanent Five, particularly on China, that China was forced to withdraw its hold on Masood Azhar. They connected 3 dots. And then they started saying that yes, Pakistan was responsible for sponsoring terrorism. My last 3 points, as a matter of fact. First is that I'm not advocating a rash response to the developments in India. What I'm suggesting here, and everybody, if you go to think tanks or if you go to these discussions, brainstorming sessions, people will tell you what 4th or 5th or 6th generation warfare is, what hybrid warfare is, what India is doing. We come up with an inventory. That is one level, understanding this phenomenon. But more important than that is coming up with a strategy to deal with it. And that is where think tanks like yours, General Jaffery, can make a huge contribution. Second point that I want to make is that, and for this strategy, I'm telling you, you have to go back to the drawing board. And you have to take note of all the variables and constants that are there, and you have to come up with a strategy which would not hurt Pakistan's national interests in the next 2 decades and make Pakistan secure, and at the same time define its policy vis-a-vis India. The last point that I want to make is that we too should become pragmatic. You know, when you become pragmatic in the face of such harsh realities, it doesn't mean that you are giving signals of being weak. You can be strong by being pragmatic also. So I would counsel that while these deliberations, I think there will be a full session, and I apologize to you that after this presentation I have to leave for another engagement. But what I want to say is that there will be a full session here, that we should in fact come up with a strategy, how to respond to all these developments that have taken place, in addition to inventorizing our problems. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.
Today, I have the distinct honor and privilege of introducing our 2012. I request Ambassador Abdul Basit to please come forward, come and on the stage and spread light on the topic, India's general election impact on Kashmir. I welcome you, sir.
Thank you very much, Bismillah, Mr. Ahmed Bilal Sufi, Major Lieutenant General Ghulam Mustafa Sahab, Ambassador Zamir Akram, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. As a matter of fact, everything has already been said by the Honorable President of Azad Jammu and Kashmir, which I think are important. Obviously, the results of the elections in India, as far as Pakistan and Kashmir are concerned, do not augur well. When persons like Giriraj and terrorism, if they are elected to Lok Sabha, and if the BJP, state and Indian society are moving towards more and more extremism, and when isolate Pakistan and strangulate Pakistan economically, and when Pakistan does not have any robust, consistent, coherent Kashmir diplomacy or Kashmir policy, I'm afraid I am not very hopeful about Kashmir. As I have been in India, so I'm afraid, ladies and gentlemen, that things will rather worsen when it comes to Pakistan-India relations and when it comes to Indian Occupied Kashmir, the situation there. Now, how to deal with this? The Honorable President talked about Kulbhushan Jadhav. My instant, the thought was as to who allowed India to bide time in this case. Why we are still sitting, even after 2 years, on his mercy petition and not taking any action on that. So it is Pakistan itself which allowed India, we ourselves gave India the space to exploit this case and put Pakistan in return on the defensive on this issue. So these are our own mistakes, our own omissions, which I'm afraid India is able to exploit to its advantage. Now we have seen how in the last 10, 15 years the Parliamentary Committee on Kashmir has worked. In my view, simply no performance. And this will continue for another 5 years, rest assured. Because the way things are in Pakistan, I am not very hopeful that even this committee under the Honorable Fakhar Imam Sahab will do much about it. Because we in Pakistan are not very clear as to how to deal with the situation, how to deal with the Kashmir dispute. We have been inconsistent about that. I always remind my interlocutors in Pakistan that diplomacy is the art of agreeing on the feasible in order to advance the desirable. Unfortunately, most of the times we are stuck with the feasible and forget about the desirable, our long-term goals. Now, we talk about talking to India. I'm not against talking to India. But the question is, as was also alluded to by the President, India is avoiding substantive discussions on Jammu and Kashmir. India would never agree on, because I met Ajit Doval many times when I was Indian. And I raised this question about having back channel discussions. What about the 4-point formula, which I criticized then too? It was again a misstep by the then President General Pervez Musharraf. But India is in no mood, and they are not in a hurry, mind you. They are willing to give time to this problem. They will brought about gradually, though, demographic changes there. They will also think about implement the long-term RSS agenda of trifurcation of the Jammu and Kashmir state. Not only revocation of Article 370 or Article 335A, but their long-term agenda is to trifurcate this state into three parts. One is Ladakh, to make it a union territory, Jammu separated from the valley, and then deal with the situation in the valley. I mean, it's not a surprise for us that while the resistance movement has come, restricted to the south of Kashmir, south of valley only, you do not see much resistance in Jammu. You do not see any resistance in Ladakh, despite the fact that the Kargil is a still Muslim-dominated area. But now, gradually things are changing, and we in Pakistan, rightly so though, talking about things without realizing as to what changes are being brought about on the ground in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Unless we have realization of that, I can tell you, nothing will succeed. We will never be able to realize our diplomatic goals when it comes to Jammu and Kashmir. Yes, we are economically weak. Yes, we do have political instability in Pakistan, unfortunately, and our politicians do not understand as to what are the challenges our country is facing. And that is the most unfortunate thing. You see the rhetoric, where it is going. I mean, nobody realizes what the dangers are. And I fully agree with the President that it is not only about India, Pakistan, or about Kashmir. Look at what is happening.
Fatigue to hear over and over again when we go to international forums. But when we document it like we prepare a case, then optics begin to change specifically. One of my senior counsels is sitting, he knows what I am saying when we say we have to prepare each case separately, file of each atrocity separately, file of each individual who has been inflicted with human rights violation separately, name, details, instance, date, occurrence, nature of injury, inflicted by who, potentially identified which military unit was deployed in that particular area, what exactly is the nature of injury inflicted, and so on and so forth. And we need to prepare our list of those individuals who could be sanctioned or that we could claim needs to be sanctioned of the Indian Army. Just like the Leahy Amendment, if you recall, some people may recall. The Leahy Amendment in US creates a direct sanction in respect of individual military officers anywhere who are violating human rights. Their travel, their other encumbrances on their right to enjoy life is being imposed. So why can't AJK government of Pakistan, come out with a potential database or an office of human rights violations in Indian occupied Kashmir, document this, link it with specific units of Indian Army, and say, Mr. Such and Such is alleged to have committed this offense, under whose command this military deployment was operating in this particular sector, in this particular city, in this particular town. That is when you start documenting the violations. And then you identify from Indian cases, from Indian Penal Code, which provision has been violated in each specific instance. And then you build an argument that here is a case, stack of files. Whether pellet guns, broadly, yes, we have pictures, we show them, we talk about them, but have we listed down those names, as I say we should, just like we prepare each individual case to be presented not only to our own people, so that they understand the gravity of what's happening, but also before the international community. So, an Office of Human Rights, it could be parked in the Human Rights Ministry of Pakistan. And why it should be of concern of Pakistan? Because it bears heavily on the conscience of citizens of Pakistan. They need to know what is happening to their brothers in Kashmir who are facing this brunt. So once you prepare through this proposed Office of Human Rights Violation in Indian Occupied Kashmir, this office, as I said, could be parked anywhere. then you can reach out to international community with reference to violations as these each case is documenting and measure them against international conventions and treaties and identify those violations with reference to those provisions, because it is not merely a violation per se of human rights as has been given to me in my topic. It is a violation of international humanitarian law. It's a violation of law of war. What's happening in Indian occupied Kashmir is not merely a human rights situation, it's a situation of occupation which is clearly established pursuant to 4th Geneva Convention. We need to use the lens of law of war to examine human rights or humanitarian law violations. And when you use that particular lens, these instances that I am highlighting, what is happening and what have been indicated, convert into war crimes in terms of Article 6, 7 and 8 of International Criminal Court. So you identify each file that which particular crime is being committed, which particular provision is being violated, not only of the ICC, but also of all the 4 Geneva Conventions. Because as I said, an occupying power has restricted mandate. It cannot bring changes, it cannot commit human rights violation. It cannot change the demography. And if you look at Article 35A of the Indian Constitution, it is a miniature version of the 4th Geneva Convention. The kind of restrictions it puts with respect to the territory of IOK are the kind of restrictions that are elaborated in 4th Geneva Convention. So it is a classical case of an occupying army. And when an army occupies a territory, the people of that territory have a right to resist that army. That is so clear in international law. People who are under the occupying force have a right under international law to resist that occupation and even use force if the case may be so warranted. So Article 35A, which is in the Indian Constitution, is a big neon sign trying to convince us in Pakistan it's an occupying army paradigm. It's an international law of war paradigm. It's an armed conflict paradigm. It's a paradigm that needs to be used in that context. We kind of continue to restrict the paradigm only to human rights, which is a very restricted paradigm. In human rights, you're talking of simple offenses, but the same act of having somebody put on the bumper and being paraded, or use of pellet guns, or rape, or any that which is normally a simpliciter offense in the human rights paradigm becomes a war crime when you put armed conflict lens around it. And 35A is a legal indicator that this is an armed conflict paradigm, and therefore the right to resistance is inherent, and further, the right to extend support to those who resist is also on the third states, including Pakistan. Not only Pakistan, but all these states have a duty under international law to extend support to those who are clamoring for the right of self-determination. There are only 2 venues where right of self-determination is viewed as a right genuinely anchored in that territory: Palestine and Kashmir. Any other group of people asking for separation or independence is viewed as violation of succession. It is successive movement. It's movement of successive, which is trying to separate from a state, which becomes an offense. But in these 2 areas, Palestine and Kashmir, it is globally recognized. It's a right of self-determination, which means all states of the world have a duty to extend support to them. So it's not merely Pakistan's responsibility. Pakistan is one of the states, and this is something, the duty that we need to invite, the duty that we need to indicate. Article 370 of the Indian Constitution also is a huge neon sign in the Constitution of India, which contradicts the political position of the Indian government and the incoming new Prime Minister Modi again. What BJP has been saying, it is atut ang, it is part of Indian territory. What Constitution of India has been saying, no, it's a separate territory. So Article 370 is demonstrating that the constitutional position of the Indian Constitution is in contradiction with the political position of its government. And clearly the Constitution needs to prevail. So therefore, Article 370 needs to stay where it is. And that is why it hurts BJP. It hurts them badly because the entire narrative of Atut Ang is destroyed because 370 obstructs that. So what are they trying to do with 370? They are trying to have it shoot down through a legal process, launch a lawfare in respect of Article 370. They tried it in 2015 before Jammu and Kashmir High Courts twice. The Hindu judges gave a verdict, no, it cannot be touched. Article 370 needs to stay because it is guaranteeing limited sovereignty of IOK. These are the terms used in that judgment. Article 370 means the Riyasat of Jammu and Kashmir retains limited sovereignty. That's so written by the judges of the Jammu and Kashmir High Court. So they were upheld. Another lawfare move was tried. And the lawfare move was that there is a separate enactment about the flag of Kashmir which has to be hoisted as a state flag along with the flag of India. Separate statute for that. So an effort was made to argue that this statute needs to be declared ultra vires in the Indian Constitution and only flag of India should be hoisted. That judgment also was turned down. They filed an appeals. They are all lawfare moves which are actually in favor of Pakistan, but nobody in Pakistan is picking it up. It's not occurring on the radar of our country and other countries that all these significant legal developments are destroying India's case, which they are trying to sideline. So then what is now being attempted, having failed in Jammu and Kashmir High Courts at the hands of the judges who are of Hindu origin, attempt is being made to take Article 370 directly, it's challenge to the Supreme Court of India. So there a petition has been filed in the Supreme Court of India challenging Article 370. 1.5 years back, Indian Supreme Court had turned down such a challenge. Now, surprisingly, there's a very interesting coincidence, ladies and gentlemen. The case was fixed for 26, 27, 28. In Supreme Court of India, it was announced. Airstrikes, these are exactly the dates of the airstrikes on Pakistan. I am a lawyer, so I am not in a position to draw conspiracy conclusions out of it, but you can think more on that. Why? And then that list was cancelled. One of my researcher team was following the developments, that what happened to the list which is normally issued a week in advance by the Indian Supreme Court in respect of these Article 370 challenge. The cases were cancelled, taken off. When will they be heard? We don't know. What will happen? We don't know. Is there a lawfare framework being applied by the Supreme Court of India or not? Should some Kashmiri become a party in those proceedings and argue, don't do this. You do not have a locus standi to do this. You should not do this. Should Pakistan not take up this matter at international forums, that touching Article 360 and giving Attorney General of India instructions to oppose it is a very serious development at an international level. So we need to pick up these indicators to build up the case that Kashmiris are being sidelined. An effort is being made to silence them. An effort is being made to completely make them redundant in terms of their individual rights. And what more, we now see another trend of vigilantes that you have been mentioned, cow slaughters, people and Muslims. What is this all? If we put it in international law jargon, it's a racial discrimination of the highest nature ever occurring in the recent times. It is discrimination on the grounds of religion, a gross violation of International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, ICCPR. We haven't formulated this so far. We need to formulate this. We need to read what's going on. Discrimination on the grounds of religion. not only perpetuated by ordinary Hindu Indians, whether they belong to RSS or whoever, but even been practiced and advocated at a state level by representatives of the state, including one of the chief ministers. Gross violation, admitted. You don't even have to prove it now. Sometimes you need to have an incidence, and as lawyers we are trained to make an effort to prove the incidence. But if it is owned by the state representatives, it is admitted. Now all you need to do is to present it to international community in the right legal phraseology. Presentation of a case is an art. When you go to a normal court of law, you know your case better than anybody else. Whether it's a case of a tenant, whether it's a case of dispossession, you know it, you know the registry, you know the land, you know the receipt, you have been receiving the rents and everything. You know it better than anybody else. You've executed your documents, you bought this piece of house, you rented it out, you executed rent deed. Then why do you go to a lawyer? Why do you get a lawyer? Because his ability to articulate your facts is far superior to yours. His ability to see through your weakness and strength is far superior to yours. You are hostage to your own facts because you have traveled through them. That is the combination we require. If you want to have improvement in leveraging the case of Kashmir relating to human rights with the global community, we need to raise a team of lawyers, young lawyers. We need to invest in lawyers in overseas, people who could see this case in a very different context. It is shocking that so much is happening in Kashmir, but not even a single legal journal of credibility has given space to human rights appraisal from a legal point of view. No conference of international legal community has been convened on this. No association, International Bar Association, has talked about it. So, ladies and gentlemen, I believe that if we need to present the case of Kashmiris to international community, whether it is United Nations or others, all these, wherever you go, whether you go to a certain country, whether you meet the politician or representatives of that particular country, or you go to an international organization trying to present the case, do you know what do they do with that document that you give to them? They refer it to their legal division for comments, for appraisal, for review, and ask the legal division to come back and tell us what is the weight in this. So whether it is the State Department's legal division, it's the UK's Department legal division, it's the EU's Department legal division, the document that you hand over, your Prime Minister hands over, or your official hands over, is passed on to the legal division for appraisal. Ask yourself, does it contain the material that it should contain, in which the legal division of any entity should say, there's a very solid case here, we need to stand by it. We tend to lean on rhetorics, we tend to lean on emotions, we tend to lean on applying to the compassion. We have been doing it for so long. See the comparison. When an international lawyer like Sir Zafrullah Khan was handling this case, Quaid-e-Azam had handpicked him and asked him to go and represent Pakistan in UN. During his tenure, these 14, 15 resolutions came out. He took the legal course. He took the legal arguments. After that, no resolution. We have been taking an emotional route. So my suggestion is that let's try legal diplomacy on Kashmir. Let's look at the legal dimension of Kashmir, which is so strong, so strong. Ladies and gentlemen, again I quote my senior lawyer who is sitting here, that we turn on head a very weak case which is brought to us by any litigant. Kashmir is such a strong case, we feel like crying that we have not been able to sell it. It's such a strong case. There's so much into it, every aspect of it. Its history, its present, its human rights violations, a small component of that. Every bit of it is so solid in favor of Pakistan. And if you revert to legal diplomacy, I'm sure you'll be able to regain the attention. And one last point. What was the watershed event after which we began to lose perception on Kashmir? It was Mumbai. Mumbai event and post-Mumbai treatment the way Indians piled pressure on us, and the way we failed to explain to international community that we are doing what we can to handle the Bombay trial as good as we can. But it was assumed that we are protecting terrorists. India was able to sell this. We were not able to sell to the international community for several years, for almost 10 years that case has been pending. We haven't been able to explain how much we have invested, how we have made efforts not to allow bails. And that perception that these people or contingents of this are present inside Kashmir and therefore it is a counter-terrorism framework, that has not helped us at all. So I believe while we look at legal diplomacy, improving perception and clarifying doubts with relation to the Bombay trial and the efforts of government of Pakistan, successive governments of Pakistan, distancing themselves from Mumbai actors, from all irresponsible actors, and saying very clearly over and over again, including the present Prime Minister, that we will not own any irresponsible acts of even our citizens if they are occurring outside our territories, is very important. That perception, led with the lawfare approach that I am suggesting, will bring back Kashmir to the center stage where it truly belongs, and that is how we will be able to justify the sacrifices of heroes of Kashmir that they are doing in Kashmir. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaks for global peace and harmony. It also campaigns for a peaceful settlement for the Kashmir conflict. Her work has been selectively displayed in Islamabad, Washington, Kashmir, as well as various competitions besides ours. She is interested in political economy and has her
the democratic voice of the public, of the Indians. Most probably Mr. Modi is coming to power, and unfortunately the Kashmiri people in Indian Occupied Jammu and Kashmir, we have faced the worst wrath and suppression under the Modi regime the past 5 years. And personally, my personal life has totally been affected, and I have not been able to visit the valley for over 4.5 years. And now again he's coming into power, so let's see what happens. And but I really liked the speech of the previous speaker, because I came a little late, so I'm sorry for that. And yes, I totally agree with him that it is so vast, the subject of Jammu and Kashmir. There's a very rich historical perspective to it. There's a political side to it. There's definitely a legal side, the human rights issue, and we need to have a strong command over all the different various aspects or facets of this struggle. And I remember I was in Lahore High Court a few months back, and I was delivering a speech on the Indian atrocities in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. And we came up with this idea of forming some kind of lawyers' commission where different experts, you have Ishtiyaq Gilani Saab, he knows about that idea that I floated there. And I was surprised that there were so many young and senior lawyers, experts in international law and humanitarian law, and they came forward and they said, yes, we'll work on this, because nobody has ever approached us in this way. And I was like, I'm looking for another Jinnah for Kashmir. I want freedom. I want somebody to come out and speak for our rights. But I'm a person who's at the forefront of the freedom struggle. My husband right now is in a death cell in Tihar jail, and he was arrested on 22nd of February on my 10th wedding anniversary. And I remember I put an online tweet that it's been 10 years to our marriage and we have only spent 60 days together, and I wished him all the best of luck and prayers. And I started getting a lot of negative messages, like trolling on it, that, you know, this will be your last wedding anniversary with Yasin. And I got a little disturbed, but that on the night of 22nd of February this year, he was arrested, and since then I've never been able to speak to him. And coming to the legal aspects, because I'm not a lawyer, but we are leading it politically, but then I started reading about the rights of political prisoners, because we have thousands and thousands of political prisoners locked up in Indian jails or in Jammu and in the valley. and the way they are treated, the way they are tortured, and the recent reports that have come forward by international organizations, they have all even, once again exposed India of how they treat the political prisoners. We are not terrorists, and India is already a signatory to many covenants on rights, civil rights, political rights of people, and rights of political prisoners. But somehow when it comes to Abhinandan, for them, then all the rights of prisoners, they wake up to that. But when it comes to my husband or the others who are facing extreme mental and physical torture at the hands of the Indian state. So I don't know what to say to celebrate the world's biggest democracy today, or to just condemn it. I don't know what to say, because it's an absolute 360-degree turn when you go towards the valley, to the health side, Indian health side. It's completely, I keep saying that this is the world's longest prolonged martial law imposed on an unarmed nation by the Indian state, and at the same time they're celebrating their democracy and right to vote, even if it is a butcher of Gujarat, or the divider-in-chief, or whatever titles that Mr. Modi has achieved, and his passion for the past 40 years of being a follower of RSS, an extremist group over there. But since he's come into power, so everybody's accepted it. But why don't we, the people of Indian Occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and when we already have so many resolutions in our favor, our right to freedom, I think every human being, according to the Universal Human Rights Charter, has a right to honor, dignity, and freedom. But somehow it's a pipe dream for the people under oppression. And why can't we get our political democratic right, where majority of our struggle, 99.5%, is peaceful struggle against the highest occupation of the world. And somehow we never get credit for that, though extreme level of violence and weapons have been used against us by the Indian forces, and be it pellets, be it phosphorus shells, be it shooter guns, be it their torture cells. There is absolutely no political voice. The face of our movement, our Hurriyat leadership, they're locked up, as my husband is in a death cell in Tihar. Syed Ali Gilani Saab is house arrested for decades. The other leadership is also locked up or house arrested. So who's going to take it forward? So they are basically pushing the Kashmiri people against the wall to pick up the gun or to move towards violence. But it is our level of patience and our level of tolerance that we still believe in the principles of a peaceful settlement of this conflict, because we know very much, because we are facing it every day, the wrath of a war on an unarmed nation, how our people are being butchered. We are literally walking on dead bodies. It's a nation of graveyards. So we know the cost and the price of a war, because we face it every day. So I would like to appeal, because a lot of diplomats are over here. As a global citizen, I think all of you must take ownership that Kashmiri people exist on this planet. We are also human beings. We also have a right to peace and tranquility and freedom. And we are against slavery, and we are fighting against it in the most defenseless, peaceful manner ever. And especially after 9/11, when the whole world order has changed, and when there are bombs exploding all over the world for illegitimate demands. Here you have one of the oldest, most crucial pending issue on the UN agenda, the issue of Jammu and Kashmir, which is still unsettled, which is a legal, which is a legitimate, a birthright of the people who are the heirs of that land. And we want our right. For that right, I think the whole world must play its effective role and join hands to solve this issue before it goes towards, God forbid, a war, a nuclear war, because that's how he won. Mr. Modi got his votes. If you recall the kind of speeches that he gave during his jalsas, the anti-Pakistan, anti-Kashmir, bashing the hyper-propagandistic approach, over-aggressive national security policy, and whatever policies that they have applied in the past, they've been of aggression. They've not been of dialogue. So this is the key time to put pressure on the new government that comes into power in India, that assert the international pressure for global and regional peace. Because mind you, the whole world will be affected if, God forbid, even if the micro war erupts, it can go towards a whole large-scale war. And I mentioned this quite a few times, that we are standing on a nuclear ticking time bomb. And we shouldn't just say that this will never happen, but if there is no mediation by the international world, by the United Nations, any effective pressure on India towards coming towards some kind of reconciliation, and the key party are the Kashmiri people, the heirs of that land who are leading the struggle. Without them, any kind of dialogue between India and Pakistan would absolutely be without any result. Because we've seen since Shimla till now so many numerous rounds of bilateral talks, but sadly each time there have been a lot of photo opportunities, celebration of talks, but somehow nothing substantial has come out of these talks. This time, if any talks happen, if they do, there's a big if, for that we need the help of the world. I mean, I'm not here to give any big lectures right now. I'm here to ask for help. For me, myself, for my husband, I appeal to all of you to use your international links, international human rights organizations, ICRC, Amnesty International. I have been corresponding with all of them as a victim of this conflict, and I really want to meet my husband. I've contacted the United Nations, the Human Rights Commissioner, the Secretary General, and Human Rights Watch, and they're in contact with me, and they're deeply concerned about the situation on ground and about Yasin's health. But I need a whole full-fledged campaign from all of you to save my husband, and also a full-fledged campaign to save the planet from any, God forbid, nuclear war, because naturally Pakistan is a smaller country, India is a bigger country, so any kind of war, if it happens, then the risk of a nuclear war is much higher. So we need to take ownership of the planet. We need to become the voice of oppressed people. We need to support all those voices that are following the path of non-violence and peaceful struggles. And I think the champion of non-violence and peaceful struggle are the people of Indian Occupied Jammu and Kashmir, who are combating. Just imagine every day against the highest occupation, even right now, the elections that took place. What kind of elections were there? There was hardly any voter turnout in Indian Occupied Jammu and Kashmir. I mean, very few people came out to the polling booth, and they were pushed outside of their homes to take few footages by the Indian media to spread it all across, and those false surveys that a lot of people participated. And if they think that 27 or 30% or 35% people came out, then why are they so insecure? Why do they have this army, so many forces, reserve police everywhere and every nook and corner? Because that's all, there's like military footprints at every mile, every inch, every kilometer. So that's what we see over there. So we really need to effectively play a role that can help the people of this oppressed nation. And I would appeal to the people, the diplomats sitting here, the professors, the journalists, the writers, artists, all of you in your own personal capacity as well. Please raise a voice for peace, raise a voice for freedom, and raise a voice for people of Jammu and Kashmir. Even if you can, just 2 lines on social media, on the mobiles, on your Twitter, or some kind of article, or you can discuss it with your friends, your loved ones, that if we want a safer planet for the future generations, let's raise a voice for the people of Jammu and Kashmir, whose voice has been silenced. They're being curfewed. I always say it's a very big pressure cooker, and God forbid, if it bursts, then maybe it'll be too late to stop any kind of war. So this is my appeal as a wife of a political prisoner, as a freedom fighter, and also as a die-hard believer in peaceful settlement of the issue of Jammu and Kashmir. Thank you very much. میں بہت شکر گزار ہوں گلوبل اینڈ اسٹریٹجک اسٹڈیز انسٹیٹیوٹ کی کہ انہوں نے مجھے دعوت دی. آج موقع بھی بہت ہی کروشل ہے. 23 ہے آج مئی، جس دن فیصلہ ہو رہا ہے ہندوستان کی کون سرکار کس کی ہوگی، اور چانسز مودی سرکار کے ہی ہیں. اور پچھلے جو ٹینیور ان کا گزرا ہے وہ بہت ہی ظالمانہ پالیسیز رہی ہیں ان کی، خاص طور پہ کشمیری قوم کے اوپر، ہم لوگوں کے اوپر، اور بہت ظلم کے پہاڑ گرے ہیں اور لاکھوں لوگوں کے گھر اجڑے ہیں اور چیخیں اور شہادتیں ہر جگہ. بہت ہی زیادہ مایوسی ہوئی ہے. تو اب پھر وہ آ گئی ہے، وہی بی جے پی کی پاور میں آ رہے ہیں. تو میں دنیا سے اس وقت اپیل کروں گی کہ یہ بہت کروشل ٹائم ہے کہ اس وقت اپنا دنیا موبلائز کیا جائے، لوگوں کو، انٹرنیشنل کمیونٹی کو لابی کیا جائے کہ وہ کشمیر کا جو سب سے بڑا مسئلہ ہے، جو کہ اس الیکشن کیمپین کے بھی دوران آپ دیکھ رہے ہیں 27 فروری کو کتنی قریب آگے تھے انڈیا اور پاکستان ایک جنگ کی طرف، اور نیوکلیئر بٹن ہی ٹک کرنا تھا. تو اللہ نے بچا لیا اس پوری ریجن اور پوری دنیا کو. مگر یہ اب 5 سال کا ٹینیور جو مینڈیٹ وہ لے کر آئے ہیں، جو جنگی جنون کا، جو ایبریگیشن آف آرٹیکل 370 کا، اور جس طرح کی ان کی پالیسیز ہیں، اتنی اگریسو پالیسیز ہیں، کیونکہ اٹس ناٹ واجپئی بی جے پی کے، یہ مودی ہیں بی جے پی والے، جو کہ جن کا جیتنے کا مقصد ہی یہی ہوا ہے ایکسٹریمزم کے تھرو. تو بہت کروشل ٹائم ہے کہ ہم لوگ دنیا کے اندر اپنی پالیسی کو بہت زیادہ اگریسو کریں. اور میں پاکستان کی حکومت کو بھی یہ اپیل کروں گی کہ اس کے اوپر ایک آل پارٹیز کانفرنس ہونی چاہیے، اور ناٹ جسٹ آل پارٹیز، آل سیگمنٹس آف سوسائٹی کو، جس میں بہت امپورٹنٹ ہے کہ لائرس کو انگیج کیا جائے، جس میں ہسٹورینس کو، انٹلیکچوئلس کو، جرنلسٹ کو، رائٹرز کو، اور جو وکٹمز ہیں اس میں ایل او سی کے بھی وکٹمز ہیں، اور بھی جو اسٹیک ہولڈرز ہیں، جو کشمیری لوگ جو باہر کی دنیا میں بھی بستے ہیں، ان کو بھی آن بورڈ لیا جائے. اور اس کے اوپر ایک باقاعدہ ایک پالیسی بنائی جائے جو کہ وار فوٹنگ پہ، کیونکہ ہندوستان کی جو نئی گورنمنٹ بھی جو آ رہی ہے، یہ نفرت اتنی زیادہ ڈیپلی روٹیڈ ہوتی جا رہی ہے ان کی عوام کے اندر، کہ جو یہ جنگ کا جو بھی جو ایک آئیڈیا ہے یہ اتنا خطرناک ہے. تو اس کو روکنے کے لیے دنیا کے اندر انٹرنیشنلائز کرنا بہت ہی ضروری ہے. اگر ہم نے اس کو کامبیٹ کرنا ہے تو the only way to is settlement of the کشمیر ایشو، اور اس کے لیے جو انٹرنیشنل سپورٹ چاہیے. اور میں ساتھ کے ساتھ اپیل کروں گی آپ سب لوگوں کی کہ میرے شوہر اس وقت ہندوستان کی تہاڑ جیل میں ہیں، ان کی اس میں ڈیتھ سیل میں ہیں، اور ان کی حالت اس وقت بہت نازک ہے. رمضان کا مہینہ ہے اور ان سے اٹھا بھی نہیں جاتا. ان کی بہن کو چند منٹ کے لیے ملنے گئی تھیں 2 ہفتے پہلے، اور ان کو اجازت نہیں دی گئی کہ ان کا ہاتھ بھی ملا سکیں. وہ اٹھ بھی نہیں سکتے تھے، ان کو ایک پنجرے میں بند کیا ہوا ہے. اور آپ سب لوگوں سے میں یہی اپیل کروں گی کہ آپ دعا بھی کریں، اور اس کے ساتھ ساتھ اپنے جو بھی آپ جہاں کہیں بھی آواز اٹھا سکتے ہیں، چاہے اپنے آفیسز کے تھرو، چاہے اپنی پرسنل کیپیسٹی میں. مگر آپ یاسین صاحب کے لیے، اور جتنے بھی ہمارے پولیٹیکل پرزنرز ہیں، جس میں آسیہ اندرابی صاحبہ بھی ہیں، جس میں شبیر شاہ صاحب بھی ہیں، جس میں سعید علی گیلانی صاحب، وہ تو ہر ہاؤس اریسٹڈ ہیں، مگر ہزاروں ینگسٹرز بھی جتنے اس وقت قیدوں میں ہیں، ان کو ایک دہشت گرد سے بھی بدتر ٹارچر کیا جا رہا ہے. تو ان کے جو رائٹس ہیں، کیونکہ ابھینندن کے لیے تو انہوں نے اتنا شور مچایا جو ان کے پائلٹ تھے کہ اس کو ریلیز کیا جائے، اور پاکستان نے ایز اے پیس جسچر ریلیز کیا. تو ہندوستان تو ایک سگنیٹری بھی ہے. ان جو لائرز یہاں پر ہیں ان کو بہتر پتہ ہے ان رائٹس کے بارے میں کوئی مسٹیک نہ بنا لوں. مگر جو سول رائٹس ہیں، جو پولیٹیکل رائٹس ہیں، اور جو کنونشنز ہیں انٹرنیشنل آن رائٹس آف پولیٹیکل پرزنرز، تو ان سب کا وہ سگنیٹری ہے. تو ان کو وہ آنر کرے. تو اس کے لیے آپ لوگ سب کیمپین چلائیں اپنی اپنی انڈیویجول کیپیسٹی میں اور ایک کلیکٹیو کیپیسٹی میں. اینڈ آئی ایم شیور جو یہ گلوبل انسٹیٹیوٹ بھی ہے، اسٹریٹجک انسٹیٹیوٹ، آپ بھی اپنے فورم کے تھرو آئی ایم شیور اس کے اوپر بھی کوئی آن لائن بھی کیمپینز اور آن لائن پٹیشنز کا بھی آج کل دور ہے. یونائٹڈ نیشنز کے اندر بھی چینج ORG پہ بھی پٹیشنز آتی ہیں. تو آپ پلیز سپورٹ کریں کشمیر کی وائسز کو اور اس کو اسپریڈ کریں. دوسرے ایشوز پہ تو بہت ایکٹیو ہے ساری دنیا اور پاکستان بھی سوشل میڈیا پر، بٹ وی آلسو نیڈ اٹینشن اینڈ اے وائس. تھینک یو ونس اگین. اللہ حافظ.
Thank you very much, ma'am, and we really support your
Underlining some basic realities that
are very relevant to this entire discussion on Indian occupation of Kashmir, the plight of Kashmiris, and how to find a solution. The first and foremost fact that we must remember, we know this, but we must remember that the United Nations Security Council resolutions, which called for a plebiscite in Jammu and Kashmir, despite almost 7 decades of being in existence or since their adoption, are still valid. You hear a lot of people who argue that UN resolutions are now outdated, the international community has moved on, the ground situation is different, but this is incorrect and we should not accept this argument. The only way UN resolutions will become invalid is when there is a succeeding resolution that makes those resolutions invalid. So until that happens, those resolutions are still very valid and a part of the international humanitarian and human rights law, as well as political decisions by the UN's peacekeeping operations and peacekeeping responsibilities. The second point is that there are at least 2 bilateral agreements between India and Pakistan that recognize that Kashmir is a dispute. The first is Simla and the second is the Lahore Agreement. Both recognize that Kashmir is a disputed area and this is an issue that needs to be resolved. Third point, which is something that India makes most of the time, that Kashmir after Simla is a bilateral issue and needs a bilateral solution and it cannot be raised in international forums. That again is wrong, because in Simla itself it is envisaged that this agreement or any other bilateral agreement does not overtake or make irrelevant decisions of the UN Security Council or the UN General Assembly. And the fourth point that is very relevant, and Mr. Sufi referred to it as well, but we refer to it from a legalistic point of view, but also from a political point of view, because there are UN resolutions that recognize the right of people under foreign occupation or alien domination to fight or engage in a legitimate struggle for their freedom, and that legitimate right cannot be equated with terrorism. So we need to make these 4 points need to be made very clear, and they should be very clear to us as well in Pakistan. Now coming to the actual issue of the plight of the Kashmiris, we have heard this, and as I said, I cannot compare with what we have heard from the previous speaker, but in my recollection, I was in our embassy in New Delhi as a counselor when the 1990 Kashmiri movement started. And since that time to the present, several generations have come and gone in Kashmir who have continued this struggle without any weakening or without any compromise in this regard. And from that time, I remember very well, January of 1990, when the then government of India imposed governor's rule and appointed Mr. Jagmohan as the governor of Kashmir, and he unleashed a wave of terror and brutality on the people of Kashmir. That kind of wave of terror and brutality has only increased, it has never decreased. So we are now faced whereby over 70 years, but particularly since 1990, there have been a systematic use of human rights violations as instruments of policy. This has a pattern of gross violations which at the end last year could not even escape a United Nations which has till now been forced to look the other way by the major powers. Because last year the UN's High Commissioner for Human Rights adopted a report in which the most significant aspect was that it called upon India to fully respect the right of self-determination of the people of Kashmir as protected under international law. This was important because this, since the UN resolutions, is the first UN document which highlights the right of self-determination of the Kashmiri people. This document went on to list a horrific list of human rights violations. And I'll read them out because it's very important to recognize what those violations are as recognized by the High Commissioner for Human Rights. Denial of access to justice and impunity for Indian security forces due to laws such as the Armed Forces Jammu and Kashmir Special Powers Act and the Jammu and Kashmir Public Safety Act. Use of military courts and tribunals which have not convicted even a single soldier for human rights violations. Illegal administrative detention without due process. Excessive use of force against civilians, such as the use of pellet guns, including against minors and females. Deliberate shooting at and killing of protesters at peaceful rallies and funerals, arbitrary arrests and detention, including of children. Use of torture, enforced disappearances of at least 8,000 people since 1989. Denial of access to health and education. Restriction on the right to freedom of expression. Reprisals against human rights defenders and restrictions on journalists. And most importantly, and most disgustingly, use of rape as an instrument of policy. Torture and reprisals by security forces such as the Kunan Pashpura incident, leading to over 143 cases of sexual violence. This is the United Nations indictment of India. But despite the fact that over the years, especially since 1990, when there have been 700,000 Indian troops deployed in Indian Occupied Kashmir, and where between 70,000 to 100,000 people have been killed and many thousands more have been injured, the Indian government has engaged in increasing spirals of violence, which has reached its worst under the last 5 years of the Modi government, where we have seen the use of pellet guns, where we have seen the use of human shields, and where an army officer or officers using human beings as shields have been actually decorated by the Indian Army Chief. This is despicable. For any civilized, for any country or any people which claims to be civilized, this is despicable behavior. Now let us consider why nothing is being done about it. And unfortunately, and I know my friend Amir Bilal Sufi talked about the legal aspects, but the unfortunate fact of life is that international law has no implementation machinery nor implementation force. The UN resolutions were adopted not under Chapter 7, which would have required mandatory action, and therefore the resolutions have never been implemented. The reality is that in this world, realpolitik takes precedence over law, or humanity, or even human rights. And the reality is that there is discrimination, especially by those powers in the world that consider themselves as the foremost advocates of human rights. But in the case of Kashmir as also in the case of Palestine, there is no application of these very same principles to protect these populations of Kashmiris and Palestinians from the kind of repression that has been unleashed upon them in the case of Kashmir by India and in the case of Palestine by the Israelis. This is also a case of double standards, because when it comes to similar sort of problems and predicaments faced by Christian communities, such as in East Timor or South Sudan, then the issues of integrity and territorial integrity and sovereignty of countries has no meaning for these countries. As you all know, Indonesia was compelled to allow the Christians of East Timor to secede from Indonesia, just as the people of South Sudan were facilitated in seceding from Sudan. So when it comes to Muslims, there is a different standard of approach, at least as we see in the context of Kashmir and Palestine. Principles of human rights and freedom and justice and law have also been sacrificed at the altar of profit and commercial gain. India's very important asset is the fact that it is a big economic market for the Western countries particularly, and they do not want to upset the Indians by pursuing and following up on their commitments to human rights and other principles. So these principles have been sacrificed at the altar of profit. Another factor for which the Indians have successfully managed to turn international opinion in their favor is the identification of the Kashmiri struggle with terrorism. And this has happened particularly after 9/11, when it was in and remains in the interest of the United States and its allies in the West to denigrate Islam, denigrate Muslims, and to treat terrorism as a Muslim phenomenon. Whereas in fact terrorism has no religion, nor does it have any borders, and terrorism is a tactic which has been used by different people, including by the Jews, by the Buddhists, not the Buddhists, sorry, the Tamils in Sri Lanka, and the Buddhists, yes, in Myanmar, and so many other places where terrorism has been used but has never been described, even by Christians or Catholic terrorists in Northern Ireland, but it has never been described according to their religious denomination. Only in the case of the Muslims has terrorism